Welcome to your community of fee-for-service financial advisors who are successfully building profitable firms that serve the next generation of clients. You'll learn from innovative advisors whose unique stories will inspire you to dream big and take action on your goals. Are you ready to live your great life and help clients live theirs? Then you're in the right place.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to welcome XYPN member Betty Wang, founder of BW Financial Planning, on the show today. Betty started her career in financial services on the buy side before deciding to take some time off while her kids were young. After the youngest went to kindergarten, she went to work in private equity, but ultimately decided that she wanted to do her own thing. She describes herself as not an entrepreneur because she doesn't fit the image that she had of what it means to be an entrepreneur, but she has built a very successful firm. She launched her firm in 2018, but struggled to put herself out into the world, so she didn't see much traction early on. That all changed in 2020 when she made the decision to lean into the uncomfortable parts of the business, primarily selling financial planning and the relationship with her as the financial planner, and her business has grown rapidly since. She's very intentional with her time, focusing on working 25 hours a week so she can spend time in other areas of her life, like with her kids while they're still in the house. I'm confident Betty's story will resonate with listeners that are struggling with the goal of having it all and how to find balance as you start and run your business. Without further ado, here's my interview with Betty. As the host, you can probably tell that I really enjoy these conversations with XYPN members who are sharing their very real and inspiring stories. The real part is especially impactful for me. It's true that the rules of safety are written in blood, and we all gain from listening to those who have been there, learned from that. If you'd like to learn more from the experiences of others or to share your own, or maybe just need other sources of inspiration, go to xyplanningnetwork.com/events and register to join one of our monthly webinars where you can participate in these impactful conversations. Hey, Betty, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me.
I am really excited to have you come on and share your story, just because you've had a really interesting journey and faced a lot of interesting challenges, both internal and external, I think, when it comes to being an entrepreneur and building this successful practice. So always appreciative of folks being willing to come on and be vulnerable and share their story with other advisors so they can probably see themselves in parts, if not most, of your journey. So with that, how did you get into financial planning? Sort of what was your journey, your path into becoming a financial planner?
Well, I've always been interested in money. I mean, since I was young, I think growing up without much money, you always want it. And so I was always very interested in personal finance. My father really liked the stock market, so we followed that pretty much. It was part of our lives. I majored in finance at University of Illinois, and I had a couple of internships with CFPs and with a large broker dealer. And I really loved the financial planning piece and the investing piece. What I didn't love was the sales piece. It didn't resonate with me. I am not a natural extrovert. My family didn't have connections, and I just didn't think it was a path that I could be successful at. So from there, I went on the institutional side where I didn't have to do sales and I could still be around investment management and the markets, which I really enjoyed. From there, I was in Chicago for that and then moved to San Francisco where I became a part of a private firm where I worked with institutional clients. And it was great. And then I think...
What does institutional client mean? Like what type of client were you working with there?
So I was working with 401k plans, pension plans, foundations, endowments, those sorts of things. So large clients who are sophisticated and usually had institutional consultants help them with their plans, right? So it was very high level.
And so primarily investment management, not a lot of financial planning going on there.
Not a lot of financial planning going. Some of the foundations and some of the insurance companies had, the double ups and the tax piece of it, but it was really not something that I dealt with as much as a financial planner would.
Okay. So then what led you away from institutional work then?
My son was born and he was sick and he was born sick. And that was something that neither my husband nor I thought that I would ever leave my career. I'm very ambitious and career orientated, but he was sick. And that continued throughout his, early years. And it was something that, as a mother, I say my heart grew three sizes like the Grinch when he was born, because we didn't really expect me to have a maternal instinct, to be honest, and nothing like a sick child to bring that out. So we talked about how we could make this work, dealing with a child who needed a lot of care, and I really felt very strongly that needed to be me. And that was a huge decision for our family because I was the primary breadwinner, and we loved San Francisco, and that's where we thought we would raise our kids. But that's where a lot of the financial planning came in. And I credit my husband for that, because he said, well, if we're going to do this, it changes our lifestyle considerably, and it changes the trajectory of our net worth and the life we thought we would have. Right. And so it took a year and a half of planning and saving and making hard choices. And we ended up moving to Denver. We needed somewhere where we could live on one salary comfortably. And we didn't know what would happen with my son's health. So I wanted to have, basically, we called it my retirement, right? I needed to earn a certain amount to be able to walk away from that job. And we needed to feel comfortable financially to have me be a stay-at-home parent for however long that meant.
Okay.
And that's how we ended up in Denver.
So what year was that?
That was 2006 when my son was born.
Okay. So 2006, you're making that decision. I guess that means you got to skip 2008. What a great time to not be in financial services.
Yeah. Well, I was still there in 2008. I left early in January 2009 because we still we're planners. Naturally, both of us are planners. And so we needed to make sure that it made sense and put all of the pieces into place. And also my firm was very small. I was very loyal to them. They treated me really well. And I became a shareholder and partner there. And it was a big decision to leave the people and the firm that I grew to really love. And so, yeah, we left 2009, and I actually had clients who had reached out to me because they thought it was because I was leaving because the markets were so terrible.
Sure.
And I said, no, this is truly my decision. And so I was a stay-at-home parent for a couple of years until then my second son was born. And, I always missed that work piece of me. It was a really big difference from being corporate, having an assistant, wearing suits every day, being an adult, right? To not having anything to show for at the end of the day, right? And using very, very small words and, breaking up with my child almost daily because he wouldn't listen. And so it was very humbling. It was very, very humbling.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I think we talk about it like, oh, it's just going to be this natural experience and you're just going to be, spend all this time with your kids and it'll be great. And it's like, it is great, but it's also really hard. And to your point, like there's an identity shift when you move away from corporate world into being a stay-at-home parent. And then that same identity shift when you got back into work mode, And so like it's not an easy time period by any stretch.
No. And from there, I was always wanting to go back to work. And then my second son also had some health issues that pushed off me trying to find anything for another couple of years. So, yeah, I went into finance because I don't like cooking. I don't like healthcare stuff. But I think I must have killed people in my previous life because, my life was cooking and needles and lots of, my other son has type 1 diabetes. So it was just a lot of things that life throws you where you said, okay, this is not what I expected. This is not how I thought my life would go, but it has been the greatest gift. And I remember people telling me that, but it's hard to believe when you're in the trenches.
Yeah, a good reminder for everyone who's thinking about saying that to a stay-at-home parent, that this is the greatest gift you'll appreciate one day. Just don't say it. Just keep it to yourself.
It is true. It is true. Where it's a slug. Yeah, it's not easy.
I also like to say, as the parent of a couple young kids, like never be the you just wait parent either, or the you just wait to the parent of young kids, because we know how this works, but it's not helpful.
Well, no, I tell people it's different now because I remember having two screaming kids at Target and sweet moms looking at you like, oh, just enjoy. It's great. And now that I'm on the other side, I was like, whatever, lady. Now that I'm on the other side, I'm like the creepy lady who's like, oh, how precious. And then I get to go in my car and drive away and be fine. So
Exactly. Yeah, it's easy to say, oh, you'll appreciate this one day, when you aren't the one who has to take those screaming kids home
yeah,
and get them in
where
car
like
seats.
I haven't slept in like 3 days. These are the same clothes I've worn for a week. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So at what point in this process did you get your CFP? Because it doesn't sound like you were doing much planning outside of internships and such, like on the institutional side. But did you get your CFP there, or was it during this time period?
No, so from there, when my youngest started kindergarten, because they were much more support, it's a public school, so they're much more able to support my son with his type 1 diabetes. And I needed something for myself. So I started reaching out, and my criteria was it had to be totally flexible, right? It had to be something where if the nurse calls, I'm there for both of my kids. And I need to be there at every party because both my kids, those are places where things can go wrong for them. How about that? And then I had to work with smart people because I love to learn, and they had to be ethical, right? That was one thing that could not, I cannot, I cannot, wiggle. There's no wiggle room there for me. And I know that about myself. And also, I had to be used. By no means, that's the one thing that I've learned about myself. Like, I have to have purpose. And if I'm there just to be a picture to show that you have diversity, that's not okay with me. So I did talk to a lot of firms who wanted to hire me for financial planning or investment management sort of thing. But I ended up I met with a person to work for a hedge fund private equity group because it was sort of, I call it my bad boyfriend stage, right? Like I'm from the buy, right? I'm from the buy side. I'm from the buy side where, buy and hold. My old firm was very much value, bottoms up. And this was totally different. It was, selling short, and it was looking at firms in a different way. And I thought that was really interesting. And the private equity piece, I really found it fascinating to talk with entrepreneurs. I'm not a natural entrepreneur, but seeing these folks, and some of them had crazy ideas, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and how much passion and self-belief that you had to have for that, I found it really fascinating. And I did that for a couple of years part-time, and they were great and fabulous people. But I was finding myself at meetings or events where I was the only woman and also the only person of color. So it was sort of like, these aren't my people, and from extreme wealth, right? Some of them were self-made, which I really enjoy, but some of them, it was inherited wealth, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it was just the extreme wealth, the male domination, and the whiteness of it that I thought, okay, maybe there's something different for me out there. And that's when I started to explore. I started taking CFP courses just to see. It's always been something of interest to me. And I thought maybe there's a different way. Maybe I could create something where people like me could find somebody that doesn't make it stuffy, doesn't talk down to them, and can make it comfortable if they're just looking for something a little bit different. And that's how it started.
I love that. And I love the bad boyfriend stage because, yeah, I mean, that really is a different. I mean, just on paper, if you said, like, I'm looking for something with flexibility and all these things, like private equity does not seem like the place you would end up, because that's, they're known for their what is the mantra of, like, 10 or is it 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. or whatever it is, like, 6 days a week, like, it's crazy hours, and you have to be available at all at all hours, all days, flying all over the country. I know when we've worked with an investment banker in the past, they said the thing COVID did was they didn't have to do all their meetings in person. And I was like, you did all these meetings in person? Like, this is dozens of meetings a week. And they started being able to use Zoom. So it does seem like an interesting fit, but also it sounds like you learned a lot, and there was an opportunity just to sort of test the waters on that side of the industry to see like, maybe not for me.
Yeah, it was a phase.
That's
Very
fair.
interesting, very fun phase. Yeah, and the guys were great, and they were very flexible with my schedule, and it worked out really well. But it was coming to the time where it didn't really feel like it was what I wanted my life to be or who I wanted to be working with. And
That's fair.
yeah.
Yeah, and I know just statistically speaking, most of our listeners are predominantly white. We're going to have a higher than average, or more than 50% are going to be male, just because of the industry. And I think it's hard for us as white men to understand the feeling of being the only person in the room who looks like us day in and day out. Like, we're very rarely faced with a time where we walk into a restaurant, we're the only white individual or the only white male. And so it's kind of hard. I think it's hard for folks to have empathy for why that's a difficult situation to be in. But having heard your story and hearing other stories, like, it is clearly not a comfortable situation to be in for most folks. And so, can you talk a little bit about that and sort of what ultimately drove you to to say, hey, you know what, I think I'd rather just sort of be on my own.
Well, I think there was one event in particular where it was for private equity folks pitching their product or pitching their fund. And one of the presenters had nudity in his presentation from Airplane. And I think Airplane's a fabulous, hilarious movie. But in a pitch meeting from somebody that I know is meticulous about data and presentation, for him to say, oops, that somehow slipped in, he, that was a little much for me. And in that particular one, I was the only female and only person of color there. And then in the same meeting, another fella, his pitch was, kind of a play off of Bernie Madoff and how it was a joke that he wouldn't want his investors to think he's going to run away with me to another country because I was the only female in the room that would work with, right? Because, it was those sorts of things where I was like, no, I don't need to do this anymore.
Yeah, that's not just cringy. That's harassment at that stage. So
I guess. I mean, I think we just come, I've come from a lot of microaggressions and harassment, and now I have a little bit more language. I think where I'm older, so I'm 46, and it's sort of a lot of the language I didn't really have until the Stop Asian Hate, and I thought, oh my gosh, this shouldn't be okay.
that's fair.
And that it was a big education for me too, right?
Well, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. So 2000 it was about 2018 then that you decided to launch your own firm?
It was. I talked to a few companies first because I'm not a natural entrepreneur. Again, I don't sell things. I want to do what's best for people. I had a real passion for helping women and helping women who didn't necessarily meet certain minimums, right? And I also I'm, my maximum, or I try to stay within 25 hours a week. So I still was looking for that ultimate flexibility. I still needed a lot of flexibility with my kids. And I didn't want to be honest, I didn't want to put on makeup and, put on pants a button like every day. Right. So I was looking for a lot, and I really didn't think that I would find any, but I did have a lot of people who were interested, and they said all the right things. Like, yes, you'll have diversity. Yes, you'll have flexibility. No, you don't have to meet any minimums. No, you don't have to come into the office, because I do come from a unique background, and I'm of an age demographic that's perfect for people. And I just didn't believe them. Right. There was a lot of there are a couple places I came really close to, but I didn't realize that my investment philosophy was so stringent, right? We're not even married yet, and we're already having these clash of ideas where I'm not one of those people who can sell something or even pretend to like something if everything in me says no way.
So was it really like firms that had more of an active management philosophy and you were coming from more of a passive background or vice versa?
Well, my old firm was active management. It was deep value and active. And no, I don't have a problem necessarily with that. It was one was pretty tactical, right? That was the one that had the rub. And another firm was, they said I didn't have to sell within their suite of products. We want best in class. But I think coming from industry, we all know best in class, okay, right? Like,
Right, the best of the ones that we sell and get a
right,
higher.
exactly. I think at not my age, but just my experience level is you kind of know when there are things being sold. And I wanted to believe them because I didn't naturally want to be on my own. And then the others, it was active management, and he wanted a partner. And I didn't want to get to a place where, I learn really fast. I like to do things quickly. I didn't want to always be the B player to his shine, if that makes sense. Like, oh, we'll bring Betty in when there's a couple or
Right. Yeah, I mean, you say you weren't a natural entrepreneur, and yet so many of the things you're talking about are the reasons for why people ultimately decide to start their own firm. So when you say you're not a natural entrepreneur, when you think of entrepreneur, like what do you think of with sort of who is a natural entrepreneur that you were sort of comparing yourself to?
even when I finally decided to do it, friends who were entrepreneurs say, "Can you sell?" And I said,
Mm,
"Absolutely not." Right? I mean, no. I will point you to great options, and I hope you pick me. But that's not. I want what's best for people who come to me. Right? I want to do what's best for them. And I think that's what's been great about XY or Limitless or NAPFA is I really feel like I've found a community where it's true, right? Yes, we all want to grow, but we also want people, the general public, to have someone who's the right fit for them.
sure.
And I've
So
given
it
up big
really was the
clients for
sales
that.
side. So it
It was
was
the sales side,
okay.
and yeah, and being out there. I mean, I wanted to put an avatar on my website. I always fight with my website. I don't want my picture out there.
Mm.
These sorts of things are not my natural thing, but I'm trying to be better about being out there.
So you wanted an avatar on your website instead of a picture. Do you feel like that was a confidence challenge, or was it just you didn't want your profile to be that public, want a little bit more privacy? Like where
I
do you
think
feel
the
like that comes
privacy
from?
piece of it, and I'm not used to being the product, right? And as a solo practice, it's hard to argue like what are what do you really when you choose me, I'm the reason, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, in many ways, it's easier to sell a product that has 50 pages of description and charts and graphs and all that. When we're selling ourselves, when we're selling a relationship, it is about us and being at the center of that. So it sounds like there was I don't know if you resonate with the term imposter syndrome or sort of what all it was you were facing in terms of confidence and being willing to be at sort of the center of that sales component of the relationship. But like, how do you feel like you've been able to move through some of that lack of confidence, and because you've built a successful firm, so clearly you've been able to find a way to make it work for you.
Well, imposter syndrome is huge, right? I mean, and that's one of the reasons why I would have liked to have gone with a firm that was more established so that I could gather more information or absorb from a mentor. I would have liked that piece of it. I mean, I think the imposter syndrome still, I struggle with it now, but I remember, well, so I didn't have a Google business page, right? Because my hope was just to be a very small shop of people who word of mouth, and that just didn't happen, right? And
Sure.
that was I think I was at the end of year two, and I was like, this isn't sustainable from a financial standpoint. I want to help people, but I cannot be a charity, right? I don't need to make a ton of money, but I would like to make some money
And so
for
you
how
just weren't
much I
bringing in
work.
clients at that point just because you hadn't really put yourself out there.
Yeah, yeah. And I did find that things picked up when I I was searchable. That helped. But I decided I didn't have the finances, but I decided to spend money on Carl Richards membership, and that really helped me. I mean, a lot of his message was play in traffic. Yes, and people can't find you if they don't know where you are.
Mm.
And that really spoke to me, and just little ways that I could get myself out there more. And that what I'm doing is what I'm trying to accomplish is valued, and it's not about the dollars. It's about being a real financial professional. And I found more of a community there as well, where I found like, okay, we all want to grow, but we all want to do the right thing for people as well. And that's, I think, coming from my background. We've all seen shady things happen. There's a reason why financial advisors, like, you want to cringe when you hear that word. So that really helped. And then the second thing, what I tell clients is invest in yourself. And then I invested in the Limitless program. And those two things combined, I really felt like helped me so much with my confidence level, and realizing that, I have something to offer that maybe people will come.
Absolutely. So yeah, so it sounds like the first 2 years was a little bit of, kind of building that confidence. Folks weren't finding you because they couldn't find you because you weren't online, or as easily available. And so that would have been going into 2020, I guess, that you sort of broke out of that, posted your Google business page, and started getting out into the market more. How did that sort of coincide with COVID?
um, I mean, COVID was great for me because I don't naturally like to go to networking events. They take a lot out of me. I'm not very good at them.
Same. So
uh,
I understand.
uh, you know, uh, so COVID, I thought, was fantastic, and I was able to make some relationships online that were really helpful through study groups. My first year with XY, I was hammering through my CFP courses. Like, I hadn't gotten through them, so I smushed everything into a year and a half ish. And so I didn't really take advantage of any of the study groups. And so I think the second and third year, that was also part of it. I said, okay, I have to put something into it. I have to be out there. I can't do this all by myself. And that was a big step for me. And I learned a lot, and met a lot of nice folks doing that.
So here we are, year 5. According to my notes, you're anticipating about $150,000 of revenue now.
Mhm.
Sounds like years 1 and 2 were pretty slow, and so really 3, 4, and 5 have ramped very quickly. So can you talk about sort of where you're finding success in terms of like how are clients finding you, to be able to sort of grow at this rapid pace over the last couple of years?
I'm not really sure because I haven't done this year. I'm trying to be more proactive about talking with people in terms of, podcasts or writing, and then I'm actually looking at SEO this year. So things of that nature. When I look back, I didn't start tracking until Limitless, and it looks like NAPFA. Well, not NAPFA. Fee Only Network has been really helpful there for me. I do find that I get some calls from XY, but they're typically not within, my niche per se.
Sure.
And then referrals, now that I've been around a couple of years. And I also I find that it's on track with what you've presented at XY before, right? The third year is when it kind of jumps.
Absolutely. Okay. So can you talk about your niche client, sort of the type of client that you really enjoy working with?
I really enjoy working with women, obviously high net worth or high earning women. It just, I think when I originally started, I thought I could help everybody, but I naturally find that I enjoy the complexity of the tax planning, the RSUs, the stock compensation, just the pieces moving around. And again, I really like the tax piece of it, which I think maybe because it's it's not something people naturally like to do. And I feel like it's such a value add to clients.
Yeah, that's a major thing that and you don't really know if you like it till you kind of get into it and you start learning, and probably the classes in tax aren't nearly as exciting as actually being the one who discovers the opportunity with a client. So How have you sort of developed that tax knowledge to dive in and be able to help clients more deeply in that area?
Well, I had looked at doing the EA program, and I've heard that that's not super helpful in terms of actual practice. And I do every Jeff Levine class I can. I have Holistic Plan. I mean, I think XY has been a really great resource for that, for learning. And anytime I see anything that's of interest, I attend those. Holistic Plan puts out a lot of great content, and then I also sometimes attend classes from CPA Academy. I don't get credit for
Mm.
it, but again, it's something that I feel like is helpful, and it continues to change. And I don't know, I like learning. So,
So, how many clients are you serving right now?
19 households.
Okay. So 19 households making about $150,000 over the next year. You also mentioned that you want to stay in that 20 to 25 hour mark or sort of that range. How close are you getting to that 20 to 25 hours? Do you have some capacity or are you starting to hit some of those time constraints?
I definitely work more in the last. I mean, this is again coming from a limitless place. So like, what's my ideal practice? And I've never really thought about it from that standpoint. My natural instinct is to you put your head down and you work, right?
Mhm.
Like, you outwork everyone, and that's again at my stage in life. Like I've decided, you know, my kids are my priority. Being there for them and having enough bandwidth for them is really a big priority for me. And how big my I don't know if I'll be a lifestyle from 5 years from now when they're gone, but right now this is my line in the sand, and that's what I'm trying to do. I don't always get there. I mean, right now my average is, I think, 20. Last year was 28 hours a week. I mean, so some weeks I'm working a ton and some weeks I'm not. But I would like to get down to that 25 hours a week with time off. And I will say I'm not great about taking time off. And that's one of my goals through Limitless again is okay, as an entrepreneur, you're and a solo practitioner, taking time off seems like you're leaving something that could fall down, right? You're leaving something in the air.
I rarely meet people who know how many hours per week they worked. So, how are you tracking that to keep an eye on it?
Excel.
Okay.
If my whole life could fit into an Excel spreadsheet, that would be
What can
great.
Excel not do?
I don't know. I was like, can it tell me? Yeah.
So are you manually tracking like daily, weekly in terms of number of hours worked so you can keep an eye on it?
I track daily, or I try to. I've, again, Limitless. There's Ben Brandt showed his spreadsheet, which was crazy. And I've been trying to use Toggle to see where I'm spending my time because, I'm always gonna allot time to learning because that's what I love to do. And the client work should be up there as well. I'm trying to figure out, like, in terms of administration and compliance, like, okay, how much time am I really spending there, and what do I want to eventually offload?
Sure, outsource some of those tasks.
Yeah.
And I also appreciate you saying that about, having the energy as well for kiddos because I think so often we think about time like, oh, well, I have X number of hours to do this and X number of hours with the kids. And so much of it for me personally is how much energy gets put towards work and therefore how much energy is left at the end of the day. Because if I'm working from 8:30 to 4:30, it's like, all right, great. Like that was an 8 hour day. And now I have two and a half. My kids go to bed at 7. So I'm like, I've got 2.5, 3 hours with my
Right.
kids. But many times I don't have the energy to have 2.5, 3 hours with my kids. And I end up getting maybe 30 minutes with them really. And so just being aware of that and proactively carving out not just time, but energy is so difficult. But it really does take a lot of intentionality when you have something like a small business that can drain 110% of your energy every day if you let it.
Yeah, and the same, trying to make time for friends, right? Everything we read is invest in your friendships. And, I will admit, in San Francisco, all of my friends, 100% were from work, right?
Sure.
Because that's where I spent most of my time. And they're amazing people, but that was not okay, right? Looking back on it, like, I need to make relationships outside, as well. So it's trying to make my life more balanced because I like working, right? Like, I like feeling productive. And I think even at XY's, there was the keynote speaker one year talked about purpose, the power of purpose and passion, and it really spoke to me because I love what I do, and that's amazing. But I also have to remember that there's other pieces to my life, and that's always been hard for me.
Same. I just got done reading The Good Life, which is a really fascinating book, and it's based on a Harvard study that's been going on like 80 years now, I think. And it's all about, I mean, they track hundreds or thousands of people over this long period of time. And so they have great longitudinal data around really all of these people's lives. And one of the common threads they found is just how important relationships is to happiness. And they're able to look at income and wealth, and if you came from wealth or if you made it yourself, and just all of these different components. And it all comes down to relationships, which is interesting because, as financial planners, I'm not sure how many, but probably single digit percentage of financial advisors, if any, really ever actually sit down and ask their clients, like, how are your friendships? Like, are you investing time and money into your friendships? Like, I used to find it difficult to even get advisors to talk to their clients about their marriage. Like, are you investing in your
That's
marriage? Like,
yeah.
the most important way. But are you, separately, like, are you spending time or developing relationships, investing the time and money and energy there? Because we think a lot about, are we maximizing our 401k? And that's great. Hopefully that leads to retirement security. But like, in the end, that's actually not what makes people happy. And so I love that you brought that up. It's something that's been on my mind lately around how do we encourage entrepreneurs that this isn't that we became entrepreneurs so that we would have the flexibility to live our life and to live our great life. And so often we let the business go a different direction and not give us that time and capacity. But it sounds like you're whether you're there yet or not, you're at least thinking about it and spending the time thinking about how to improve.
Well, I'm very conscientious of it because I naturally it's hard, when we have the external yardstick. It's learning how to use the internal yardstick, especially in our business where you're measured by AUM and you're measured by how many clients you're bringing in, or that's one measurement, right? So it's
Sure.
hard for me, right? It's that competitive part of me is like, well, I should be doing that, and then I have to take a step back, and it's constant, right? I have to take a step back and say, what do I really want for my life? And what does that mean? And maybe and giving myself the permission to change my mind.
Yeah, I love that as well, because you mentioned that you may not always want to be a lifestyle focused practice, but where you're at today with your kids' ages, that makes sense for you and your family. And I love that too, because I think that so often feels like every decision we make in business is forever. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, if I say I'm going to be a solo, I'm going to have to be a solo forever. And I don't know if I want to be a solo forever. And it's like, look, what do you want to do this year?
Right. No,
Like,
it's so true.
and it's okay to say, hey, like, this is what I need now. And, when kids are out of the house, I want to go boutique, or I want to bring another advisor, or just bring in additional help. And I want to make twice what I'm making now because I'm willing to work twice as many hours. Those are decisions you can make over time. Do you have a framework for how you're working through? Because you've talked about, like, some of these have been, annual goals, things you're focused on, taking a step back and reviewing. Like, those are not things that I find we do naturally. So do you have a system? Is that mostly coming from the Limitless program, or do you sort of have your own system for trying to keep yourself on track and focused on what really matters?
Limitless definitely gave me a framework, and it also talked a lot about focusing on one thing per quarter, which helped me because everything always looks shiny and everything always looks like, oh, I should try that, or that would be great for my clients. And really focusing on one thing at a time helped. And the reflection, right? Through Limitless, they have a program to do that. But I mean, I'm a big fan of James Clear, and he does an integrity report in June. So I've started to implement that for myself. Like, what do I really want from life? Right. Work is always going to be a big part of that because, again, I need that purpose. Um, but it's just trying to make sure that my life, where I'm spending my hours, is where I want them to be. It's intentional rather than just kind of run away.
Can you tell me more about that June, the integrity letter? I've not heard of that.
Well, it's a time where he writes down what he wants in his life, or what are his true values, if he's reached them that year and what his, what the values are for next year. And it's just an integrity. Like, am I living the life according to my values, right? It's life planning basically, but it's just a reset. And he does it in June because why does everything have to be year end? So,
Want to do it differently.
right. So, and it's a kind of a nice time for us planners because there's not, it's not typically as busy during the summer. So I just find that a nice time to reflect.
I'm a big fan of Gino Wickman, who's the
Mm-hmm.
author of the traction system that we use here, or the EOS system that we use here at XYPN. And he's one that talks about, he spent the last 25 years focused on helping people build and run their business. And he says he wants to spend the next 25 years focused on the individual. And so, but he has a book called EOS Life, and it really sort of breaks down like that in the end, we want to do the work we enjoy doing with people we enjoy doing it with, that we're properly compensated, but that we also have time for outside activities, things outside of work that we want to do. And I really like that framework because in the book, he tells the story that every quarter he tries to delegate something, like something that's on his list he tries to get rid of. And one quarter, he said he came to it, and the last thing that was on the list was to sell EOS worldwide. Like this business he had created that he ran, that he's known for. He didn't really want to sell it. It just, his thing was he had to delegate something. He delegated so many things that he was left with selling a business so that he could focus on these other endeavors, which was just, it blew my mind because I can't even imagine having that. I would just be like, no, I'm not delegating anything this quarter.
Yeah.
But that framework is very similar to what you're talking about, which is, get really clear on, are you spending time where you want to be spending it? Are you doing the things you enjoy doing, and allowing ourselves to grow? He's also a big fan of sort of this like 10-year cycle that, again, when we start a business, we think, oh, this is forever. Like, I'm going to do this thing forever. And people kind of put that expectation on us as well. But it's like life kind of happens in these 5 to 10-year cycles with kids' ages and with businesses and with our personal life and our health and all of that. And that, every 5 to 10 years, it's okay to sit down and say, okay, let's hit the reset button. Let's do something different. And I love that framework, both working with clients. I think it can be a really powerful tool to be able to leverage with our clients, be sure they're living their best life. But we've got to live our best life as well as financial planners.
Yeah. I mean, I think of it, in the investment world where they do, like brand new portfolio, right? All cash portfolio. What would you buy? And how much, how does that look like according to what you own right now? It's sort of like, okay, let's reset and think about it. Yeah. I've tried, this year, my goal that is to try to find a hobby, because, right? Like it's, I have my kids, I have my business. A lot of the things I do around both those things, like, what's my hobby? What's your hobby? I'm trying them all out. So what do you like to do?
Exercise is about the only thing I have time for outside. Like I get up early 5. I'm now an early riser, like 5:15 workout. Cause if I don't, then it doesn't get done. But yeah, my hobby is work and kids as well. Mine are a little bit younger than yours. So I've got an 8, 4, and 2-year-old. So I'm still changing diapers. So.
Yeah, but those are great. See, I'm doing it. Those are great
you're
years.
Doing it too.
Appreciate,
You're gonna miss these years.
I have guys who are big and they smell bad, and they're taller than me. It's a whole different ballgame.
I love the question though, that you sort of prompted there with, if you were in all cash, how would you invest the money? And like, even to take your own business, you said you're at 150,000 revenue. Like right now, firms are selling for 2.5, 3x gross revenue. So let's just say if you didn't own this business and you had $450,000, $500,000 of cash in the bank, looking for your next opportunity, would you spend that money to buy your business? Would you take that cash, buy this business, and to do the work that you're doing with the people that you're doing it with? And I haven't really thought of it in that context, but that's an interesting way of really.
Yeah, I've never thought about it like that.
Like really asking ourselves, because you could just go sell your business for $450,000, $500,000. Had to pay taxes, but taxes aside. And so
I'm not sure. It was sort of like, when we've talked about building businesses, there was a lot of, I was advised to, well, why don't you just buy clients, right? And that's not the type of business that I want to build, because it is what you're saying. Tim Ferriss, I read it in Tim Ferriss. It's like who you're doing it with, like what you're doing, when you're doing it, where you're doing it. And I really want control over the who, right? And
Yeah.
that's always been my mantra, like with my business, is no jerks. I don't want to work with them. I don't want to refer to them. I don't want to take them on as clients. And maybe that's why I have a hard time at networking events. Not that you can't find a diamond in the rough, but I just, all of that just is, I don't have the energy for anymore.
Yeah, it's probably one of the understated benefits of owning your own practice is that when you work in a larger firm, you're given clients. You're told who to work with, and on one side of the continuum can be folks that you just don't get along with. On the other side, and we've had folks on the podcast that have shared stories of being sexually harassed by their client, and they're not allowed to do anything about it because they're a big client, and the firm won't let them go. That the BS that comes with that.
Yeah.
And so just the ability to, to your point, to be able to work with the clients that you want to work with, to be able to draw those lines, to say like, hey, I just don't work with clients who communicate this way, because sometimes you have people who on the phone, they're amazing, but every time you get an email, you think they hate you. And for some folks, that's great. They're like, yeah, I would love to deal with, work with those clients. Others are like, yeah, that drains me every time I get that Friday night email. And then by Monday, like everything's great on the phone. You don't have to work with those people. And so just, the ability to work with clients that you really enjoy working with is I would say an understated part of why, people ultimately will launch their own firm and what value they get from it, I would say.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, this is the best job ever, right? I mean, I struggle with, if I talk to you and I like you, I have a hard time saying no, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a lot of the coaching. And I'm sure I know that I'm not alone. And working on and being okay with that. That's been a real mental block for me, is it's okay to say no. As long as I have somewhere, I've found great people to refer to. But yeah, that's been great about the business, but it's also been something that I have to, I've been maturing in the business too, as a journey, right?
Yeah, I remember those early conversations when you feel like you're saying like, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're not rich enough to work with me."
Yeah, because it makes me feel really gross.
Yeah, I get it. And obviously you've gone through some coaching around this, and for listeners, like it's not easy, but it is a recognition that we only have so many hours in the day. We have our own life that we're trying to support, with both financially, energy wise, and so it is okay to be choosy when it comes to our clients. Have a referral source, because there's going to be an advisor out there who's a great fit for them, who's in their price point, providing that service. But it's also okay to carve out a certain number of hours a week, a month, a year for more charitable endeavors. And so, whether that's giving time away for free or doing more group coaching or whatever the thing is, we have some advisors now that are doing that with doing office hours for other advisors, where they say like, hey, I want to help, but I can't help everyone who calls me. So an hour every other week, and you can come on and ask me whatever question you want. Like, that's a great framework for being able to give back, but also not take away from your own life and your own energy and time. Just because you're a fiduciary doesn't mean you have to help everybody, because you can't. You can't help everybody and help yourself.
Yes. No, I agree with that 100%. And trying to find somewhere that makes me feel okay is those sorts of things, right? I volunteer with Savvy Ladies and try to help who I can and refer them to the right people. And I welcome intro calls, even though they take time. I want them to have a friendly voice where they feel comfortable reaching out again, even though I might not be the right person, because it is a big step, especially for women, to reach out and try to find somebody to help them.
Absolutely. And a good reminder for all the planners who are getting started, just starting your own firm, reach out to the advisors in your niche and talk with them, because, if you're someone who wants to work with high net worth women, reach out to Betty and let her know that you're there, because you're getting full. And so being able to have a referral source, have a trusted advisor that's a fiduciary, that's fee only, that's a CFP, that believes the same ethical, that has the same ethical alignment with you. That's really important. But we need those resources. And listeners to this podcast now, I've said it 100 times, like I built my business on the back of referrals from advisors with $1 million minimums. Now, I did it at a time where you don't have $1 million, therefore I will refer you to Alan, was my niche. So I am so glad that folks have moved beyond that. But I worked with a lot of amazing clients that way. So So as you're looking forward, it sounds like you have some really clear goals for this year around sort of, protecting your time. You said you're, looking to make friends and develop a hobby, that sort of thing. What are you working on in the business this year for the next, 12, 24 months? Like, what are your big goals, things that you're really focused on?
I guess marketing is the word that I would use. I'm just working on SEO and getting out there more so that I can either help other advisors see that there's not just one way. I think that's the key to attracting more women and more and different people who are in different stages of life, right? And then to provide education for more women out there that's more accessible. And it's marketing. It's trying to be out there more. I've hid for a very long time.
I'm interested in exploring that a little bit, if you'll let me. Of just, you're at a point where you've built a successful lifestyle practice. You're hitting your hourly goal, where you said 20, 25 hours. You were at 28 hours last year a week. Do you need more clients? Like, is that actually?
I would like more. I do like the growth. I do like. I feel like the seats on the bus right now. I'm thinking about 30, and then I'll reassess. And I like the growth of it, right? I like the trajectory. I don't necessarily need to take 10 a year, but if I get one or two great clients a year, that'll make me really happy. And in the meantime, if I can make the general public, the female population say, okay, there's somebody out there that maybe I could talk to, that they're not all stuffy, old, telling me that I can't buy a latte person, then I think that's helpful too. And it's also like a personal goal. Like, I want to get past this fear.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. As we're coming to the end of our time together, I'll ask you the final question. And if that's, if there's one piece of advice that you wish you could go back and give your younger self, what do you think that piece of advice would be?
Take advantage of the groups I wish I had taken advantage of XY and everything it had to offer when I started. I know that I was pushing through the CFP, but finding your people, even though it's painful, it takes a while. I feel like that's really changed everything for me. And that's XY, NAPFA, Limitless, Carl's group. But I had to make the conscious effort to ask for help and to do that. So asking for help is huge.
Awesome. Well, Betty, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share your story. I really appreciate the vulnerability to share the struggles and the challenges and the successes that you've had. So I wish you the best over these next coming years, and I look forward to getting an update. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private Facebook group for fee-for-service advisors. It's the community you've been looking for that's there to provide support no matter where you are in your journey. Best of all, it's free. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP.
Thanks for listening to XYPN Radio. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to leave a review that will help grow the movement of fee-for-service advisors, serving next-gen clients and building the firms of their dreams. That's all for today's episode. Until next time.